Managing is not a series of mechanical tasks, but a set of human interaction. The Human Side of Management by Thomas Steele, Harvard Business Review. As a project manager, we are all agreed one of the main factors in success of project management is communications management. Proper and timely distribution of information among all internal and external project stakeholders. However, these key factors is relied on human side. On these special occasions, this is the topic that we would like to discuss, the people puzzle. Good evening to our viewers in Indonesia and a good morning, afternoon to those joining us from other parts of the world. Welcome to PRANKS, Project Management Knowledge Rings, brought to you by the Project Management Institute Indonesia chapters. My name is Iksan Lukida. You can address me as Luki. I am a program board member of the chapter of the PMI Indonesia chapter. And today I will be your host. On behalf of the PMI Indonesia and the chapter volunteers, I would like to extend our very warm welcome to our speakers and all the attendees tonight. If this is the first time for you to join PRANKS, this is a regular event that we run twice a month, where we invite subject matter experts and practitioners to share their knowledge, ideas, and experience. If you would like to speak at our event, or if you have any suggestion for a speaker that you would like us to host, do reach out to us through our website or social media channels. But before we strike to our main session, I would like to inform you of our annual session, TIMEX. We proudly announce the 11th International Symposium and Exhibition on Project Management by PMI Indonesia chapter. This event will be held in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, in 3 until 4 October 2023. We're inviting outstanding guest speakers. They are all professionals coming from project community with solid experience in their field. You can see the detail in the website, but in here, as you can see, there are Dr. Ilham Habibi, head of the National ICT Council of the Republic Indonesia, and there is also Prastio, Strategic Director Pelabuhan Indonesia, Joko Purnomo, VP Central Project Management Pertamina, Alam Syah, the Partner Solution Consultant Google, and there is also Arif Prastio, Senior Integration Project Manager at Slamberse. There are all project professionals that you want to see in that event. But as you can see, there are a lot of speakers in here also. As I mentioned, you can see in the details. Okay, so we begin our sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, people are the key factors that make difference between success and a challenging learning experience. Today, we are so lucky because we have Christine to seek insight into what drives people within projects and now how to communicate with them in a way that works as we were. People are the key factors that make difference between success and the challenging experience. So the people puzzle. Joining us from Oldham, Manchester, United Kingdom is Christine Dawson, Master Trainer of NLP. A quick introduction about her. So Christine is a Master Trainer of NLP, Master Trainer of Hypnosis, Trainer of NLP, Master Coach, and Master Timeline Therapy. She is graduated from University of Leeds as a Bachelor of Science and holds several professional licenses such as NLP, Trainer of Master Therapy Timeline, and she also qualified as CIDP, Qualified Coach Mentor. With 15 years of international training experience, Christine is considered an experienced, charismatic, and practical trainer who adeptly simplifies intricate concepts. And after 17 corporate years, Christine founded Quest for Success Limited, leveraging her diverse business background, including IT, coaching, and innovation. Christine also motivated to stand out as a few of NLP trainers who applies her training in coaching and therapy continuously, innovating and learning. But before we start, I would like to remind our audience, please, all participants will be on mute and videos are turned off. If you have any question, you can submit in the chat box and the session will be recorded. And the e-certificate will be distributed to all participants to your email. And auto submissions is exclusive for chapter member only. Okay, so I would like to greetings our speakers. Hello, Christine. How are you?
Hello, Luki. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm very well, thank you. And it's great to be here with everybody. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so we're very pleased. We are very thrilled that we have you here and to seek insight from you. Okay, so today I would like to hand over to Christine Dawson. Please, Christine.
Thanks, Luki. So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys so you can see the slide back there. Okay. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. For me, it's good afternoon. I know for most of you, it'll be good evening. So today, I'm here to chat to you about using the science of neuro-linguistic programming within project management frameworks. So really focusing in on the people puzzle, because people really are a puzzle, aren't they? We're made up of so many different parts, which in some cases fit together really nicely, and in other cases, this piece is missing, and we don't really know how to work out people's behaviours. When I was working in the corporate world, before I ran my own business, I spent around 10 years working in project and programme management. And what I was doing was substantially in IT. So I was working on the projects and programs around inserting IT systems into a national-based company, so 14,000 staff. So you can imagine that a lot of the focus went into installing the new technology, getting the systems working, and getting the processes to use those systems and the policy around those systems well embedded into the organisation. And you know, each and every time, the one thing that we always missed was to pay attention to the people that were going to be affected by the project, and also the people who were working within the project. And as I've chatted over the years to many different project managers, I think that is something that's quite common. So the trivium of 3 Ps, process, policy, and people, it seems that people seem to get put on in the background, and we focus way too much on process and policy. It's been well documented that the primary reason for projects failing, especially in a large organisation, is the lack of management around people. So what I'd like to do today is to give you some ideas, some thinking that will help you to begin to unscramble the people puzzle, to put the missing pieces into place, and to think about how you can really pay attention to the person elements in your projects in order to make them more successful. So rather than a people puzzle, I want to help you turn it into a people priority. Now, to really put people at the centre of a project or a programme of projects, you need to be able to understand what makes people do what they do. What makes people think like they do? What makes people produce certain behaviours? What gives people certain thought processes? And very importantly, how does emotion fit into the workplace and how people respond to project change? Now, this is a very quick session. We have one lovely hour together, and then at the end of the hour presentation, we have some time for me to answer your questions. So I'll come to questions right at the end, if that's okay with everybody. So I'm going to give you a few insights just to start you off thinking about how people can be a priority within the project framework. So just to put a bit of context around that, I wanted to show you these two little pie charts because I think they are so telling of how PMI and PMP examination content has changed over the past 8 years or so. If you look at the 2015 domains, there's nothing in there about people. It's all about planning, executing, monitoring and control, closing down the project, initiating the project, and all the skills that go around that. If you look at the domains that are now there in 2023, look at the size of the people domain. 42% of the whole PMP examination content is about people. So it's clearly a priority in the PMP framework. So just to unpack that domain a little bit, it's all about being able to manage conflict, and that would be within a project team, between project teams and stakeholders, and also between project teams, stakeholders and end users. It's a holistic view of managing conflict. Project managers are also expected to lead a team and to do that successfully. A good leader supports team performance and empowers their team members and their stakeholders within the project environment. It's about making sure that people who are involved in the project are adequately trained to function in a really successful way, to have their performance right at the peak of their capability. And to do that, they've got to be adequately trained. Project managers are expected to build teams and to remove any obstacles that team may experience as they're working towards their goals. Project managers need to be great negotiators. They need to be great collaborators. They need to be able to build a shared understanding of the project amongst all the stakeholders. They need to be able to engage and support virtual teams, which is a big part of the project environment these days. A lot of things happen virtually, just like we are today. We have to set team ground rules, mentor relevant stakeholders. So coaching and mentoring becomes important. And promoting team performance through the application of emotional intelligence. Now, to understand emotional intelligence, you've got to understand people and the psychology of response. So what initiates emotion in your team members, in your stakeholders, in your end users, and how do you manage that? So it's a big job, the people part of projects. So that means project managers need to really understand what makes the people puzzle a whole picture. So they must understand behaviours. So what makes people behave like they do? They need to understand motivators. How do you motivate your project team? How do you motivate your stakeholders into action? How do you motivate your end users to buy into the change? And also to understand attitudes. So we get this pyramid puzzle, if you like. The pyramid builds up how people will respond. It's looking at the psychological approach to how somebody will behave and act at any particular time within any particular environment. So we can surmise that key project leader competencies include being a really master communicator, being able to use your language on purpose in order to get your desired results. They must be excellent motivators, negotiators, they should be influential. Really important that they should be resilient. You know yourself, personal resilience becomes really important, especially in those big projects that take a long time. And effective coaching and mentoring, being able to coach your project team and your stakeholders through to the desired result so that everybody receives a win. So again, that's a lot of personal skills. So how do we get a healthy dose of all of those things? So the Project Management Institute states that what's required on your medicine spoon is a lovely blend of strong communication skills, interpersonal skills, and solid leadership abilities. And the common theme between all of those things is, of course, people. I'd like to share a little statistic. This is from the Pulse of the Profession journal. Apparently, 73% of senior executives attributed a high or very high response to putting a priority on developing talent with leadership skills for the successful management of projects. So there's a lot of personal skills here. There's a lot for you to embrace, all on top of process and policy. So if only there was a great way to learn all of these things. Well, the good news is that the science of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short, provides us with a one-stop training to allow you to develop all of those skills. That's right, one training to develop all of those skills. It is so fundamental because NLP is the study of what we do in our heads when we create something successful. So if you think of all the super successful project and program managers that you know in your profession, have you ever stopped to think what makes them different from everybody else? What makes them really successful? And the answer is, it's what they do in their heads. It's how they think. So NLP is the art and science that shows us how people think. And it shows us how to positively change human behavior really easily and quickly with permanent results. So NLP is a model of excellence. So NLP isn't really concerned about average, what an average person would do. NLP is concerned with what excellence looks like, what an exceptional project or program manager looks, sounds and feels like as they do their job. So it models that excellence so that we can learn it from one person and teach it to another. So how does NLP relate to project leadership? Well, NLP provides a really deep understanding of the psychology of human response. It gives you a predictor, if you like. Once you understand how people produce behaviour and how they produce responses, you'll work out that people are pretty consistent in how they respond. And once you have understood how your project team or how your stakeholders are going to respond, it gives you some predictability. It helps you to know how that person is going to respond. And that means that you can lead them really effectively. So project managers can use the science of neuro-linguistic programming to their advantage as really powerful and strong leaders within projects. So NLP provides a lens through which project managers can view and really understand project environments and the people who are working within the project environment. So there's all the why it's important for us to think about having tools and a tool set that allows us to understand human response. I'm going to give you a very, very basic insight into just how that works. So let's start with a model of thinking. So all of the time, as you're working on your projects and just about in every other area of your life, there are events going on outside of you. So things are constantly happening in your environment. Now, those events that are happening outside of you come into your neurology. And they do that through your 5 senses. So visual, your sight; auditory, your hearing; kinesthetic, your sense of touch; olfactory, your sense of smell; and gustatory, your sense of taste. So your sensory organs, which are attached into your neurological system, are constantly pulling in information. It's pulling in so much information that it's too much for you to consciously process. It's around 12 million bits per second of information that is hitting your neurology through your sensory organs every second of every day. That's huge. Now, we can't cope with all of that information. We simply can't consciously process it. So what we do is, at the unconscious level, so outside of your awareness, you delete some of the information. Other parts of that information you'll distort, and still more of that information you will generalize. And by going through this filtering process, you start to shrink all of that information down. So you're shrinking it from a huge amount and you're cutting it down chunk by chunk by chunk. And you do that until you come to a quantity of information with which you can consciously cope. And that's tiny. It's only about 126 bits per second of that 12 million. We've gone from enormous amount of information to a very small amount of information. And with that 126 bits per second of information, you form an internal representation. This is your concept of reality. And you'll hold that in your mind as pictures, of sounds, and of feelings. Now, we are limited to the amount of information that we can deal with at any one time. In fact, it's only 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information that we can deal with at any one time. So as human beings, we are limited to what we can understand about the world around us. So here's a little mind twister for a Thursday evening. None of us know what reality really looks like, because you can't observe reality. You can only observe your little chunk of it, your 126 bits of information. And of course, everybody on this call, everybody who's watching today, will choose a different 126 bits of information in order to create their internal representation. And that's why everybody looks at the world differently. That's why we all have different opinions. That's why we all think differently. So when you're working within a project and people are not agreeing with you, it's just because they've got a different 126 bits of information to pay attention to. Our internal representation is attached to our physiology. We have a mind-body connection, and you can't break that connection. Our mind and our body work together. And our mind and body work together to give us an internal state. Our internal state is how we feel. So your state might be a highly motivated state, or a state where you feel you can achieve anything. Or indeed, it might be a nervous state or an anxious state. And of course, the internal representation and the physiology are constantly giving each other feedback. So for an example, you know yourself, if you're thinking very negatively and you're getting anxious or maybe nervous, notice that your body changes immediately. Your heart rate changes, your blood pressure changes. Maybe your stomach feels different. Maybe you start to perspire. Your body will react to your internal representation and your state. So we get a feedback loop. And from that process, we then get our external behavior. So when you're working with your project team or your stakeholders or even your end users, and they produce a behavior that you think, oh, well, that behavior isn't really appropriate. It's not contributing to our results. Now you can stop and think about that. How are they representing the reality, their environment, that causes them to produce a certain behavior? So once you understand how this model works, it really enables you to view people in a very different way. Now you can look at them with a more flexible mind and think, okay, they're not wrong and they're not right. They're just representing the reality here in a different way to me. When we learn NLP in detail, we learn how to help people to alter their internal representations to get different behaviors. Now, we've already established that 126 bits of information is way, way removed from reality. It's only a little chunk of reality that we're paying attention to. And then guess what? We then limit our thinking even more. We limit our thinking even more by taking that internal representation and adding language to it. Our internal dialogue, your self-talk, when you're talking to yourself in your head. So our internal dialogue are the words we use to label our experiences, the stories that you tell yourself in your mind and convince yourself that that's the truth. So the minute we've put language to something, we have created reality. Just think about that. When you have a problem, the problem only exists because you have expressed it in language. Without the language, the problem isn't there. So this is forming the basis of how to be a really excellent communicator. To understand how people are choosing the language that they choose to use and how we can have them think differently by expressing ourselves in a different way. So we all have our own very personal concept of reality. So that being true, what you perceive to be real is what you project out into the world. Think of the world around you as one of mirrors. Whatever you project out from your concept of reality is what gets mirrored back at you. It's reflected back at you. So by thinking about this, we can start to get below people's behaviour and start to think about the words that they're using and how that is creating their concept of reality. Now, let's put all that into the framework of a change project. People typically go through different stages when they think about change. So this is the change state indicator. So when somebody is at A, everything is going well. So they are in their business, they are working well, they are performing, everything is working nicely. They are comfortable and they are relaxed, they are within their zone of comfort. And then after a certain period of time, you see the line is straight, everything is consistent and synchronized. And then there comes a point in time when things start to change. And this might be the initiation of a project. Nothing's changed yet, they're just getting the idea that something is going to change. And that begins to feel really uncomfortable. And what people find is all of the processes and procedures and ways of thinking and behaviours that they were doing at point A are no longer working, and they don't know why. So they try and go back to A, and they can't. And then somebody says, okay, now we're going to change. Oh, and they end up in C. Oh, that doesn't feel good. C is, I don't want to change. I like things the way they were. And they desperately try and climb out of that trough back up to A. They want to go back to the way things were. And when that doesn't happen, they can end up, if they're very closed to change, which I'll talk about in a minute, they end up feeling emotionally unable to perform. And at its worst, that can even look like stress, or even worse, depression and absence from work. So what we need to do is to enable this person to open up a new way of thinking so that they can climb to a new way of working. So the project is now in place with a whole new way of working, and now they feel happy and consistent and able to perform again. So whilst people are following this change pattern, as project managers, awareness of this is really important, because if your stakeholders or your end users end up in that C position, you're going to get resistance. Now, the perfect thing for a project manager to be able to achieve is to take the stakeholders, the end users, from B to D without going into C. And that's about understanding how people think and how people behave and managing them to stop them from experiencing stress, depression, anxiety. There are really three different ways in which people respond to change. Some people are very open to change. In fact, they welcome it. They'd be bored without it. Very open to change. And they will easily go from B to the new reality, the new A1, without even thinking about it. Other people are arrested towards change. So somewhere in the middle, they are willing to change, although it does have a level of discomfort attached to it. And they may resist it a little bit. And then other people are closed to change. They don't respond to change well. They don't enjoy change. They find it uncomfortable. And they are the people who are more likely to slip down into that area that we have labelled C and get stressed, get anxious, and provide resistance to the implementation of either all of your projects or elements of it. So you can see that understanding people and how they respond is really key if you to avoid resistance and absence from work when you initiate the change within a project. It's also really important as a project manager for you to know how to motivate people. So how to motivate people towards performing really well, performing to the real peak of their performance, and to motivate them towards change. Now, we're all motivated in a different way. So we could use the widely accepted metaphor that some people are carrot people and some people are stick people. So when you're a project manager and you're managing a team of project professionals and managing stakeholders as well, you really need to know, are these people motivated by the carrot, the reward, or are they motivated by the stick, the consequences of not doing something? And everybody has a natural predisposition towards one of those things. Neither is good or bad. There isn't one that's better than the other. The key is that you as project managers understand how people get motivated, so you can use your language and your approach towards that person appropriately. So how do we know whether somebody is a stick person or a carrot person? Well, there's a very easy question you can ask. You can ask somebody, what do you want in a job? What's important to you about a job? Or what do you want in a project? What's important to you about a project? You might even want to ask yourself that question for a little moment. Just ask yourself those questions now and just be aware of what comes to mind. Have you got something? Now, you will have done one of two things. You will have either thought about everything that you desire in a project, or everything that you desire in what's important to you about the project in terms of what you want, or you will have thought of everything that you would not want. So, for example, you might have thought, well, in a project, I want a really great team. I want to have some really engaged stakeholders. I want clear understanding of what my project brief is. I want the systems that will help me. All of the things that you want. Or you might have said to yourself in your mind, well, you know what, I don't want difficult stakeholders. I don't want a lazy project team. I don't want executives who are going to veto my decisions and micromanage me. I don't want to have to work in the office. So you might have thought of different things that you don't want. Now, whichever way you thought about that is great. If you thought about everything that you wanted in a project or a job, then that is what we call toward thinking. If you thought about everything that you wanted and a little bit about what you didn't want, that's toward with a little away from. If you thought about some things that you really want in a job or a project and some things that you don't want in a job or a project, that would be both toward thinking and away from thinking in equal measure. If you thought about a list of things that you don't want and a little bit about what you would like, that's away from with a little toward. And if you just had a list of things that you don't want, then that's what we call away from thinking. So toward thinking is the carrot and away from thinking is the stick. So why is it important to know this about your project team and your co-workers? It's important because if you're going to motivate them, you need to know whether you need to dangle the carrot or whether you need to beat them with the stick. So towards people, they want to know what the reward will be. So when you finish this part of the project, when you've worked towards this part of the project, you are going to be rewarded by this. You're going to get a reward. There's going to be a good outcome. And people who are towards thinkers will be motivated towards that. There's no point in telling a towards person, if you don't do that, there are going to be negative consequences. That will not motivate them. That will just make them stressed. If you say to them, look, when we get this part of the project done, this is going to be the reward. That will motivate them. When we think about away from thinkers are motivated by the stick. So you would tell them, look, if we don't get this stage of the project completed and closed in this time frame, there is going to be serious consequences. You're going to lose this part of the project. We'll lose our funding. We will get penalised in terms of our funding. We may even have to close the project. So that would motivate them. There is no point in telling an away from person, oh, if you complete that, you're going to get this lovely reward. They don't care. That will not motivate them. They need to know the unhappy consequences, and that will kick them into action. So you see, as a manager, as a project manager and a manager of a team, without this information, you will motivate people according to your preference, because that's what makes sense to you. If you're an away from person, you will be motivating everybody with away from language. If you're a towards person, you'll be motivating everybody with towards language. So you'll only be motivating a percentage of your project team. So to be able to motivate everybody, you need to know how each individual person is motivated. And then all you have to do is construct your language accordingly. So let's continue our thinking of how to understand people better and how to approach our thinking about other people in a more productive way. So how you perceive the members of your team is really important. Now, in the world of NLP, we have certain presuppositions. And by that, I mean convenient assumptions that we hold to be true that make your life as a communicator, as a negotiator, as an influencer, as a leader, far more productive. Let's have a look at them. So the first one is about having respect for another person's model of the world. So I started this session showing you the model of thinking, and that it's impossible for everybody to think the same because everybody selects a different 126 pieces of information to build the model of their world on. So once you respect that, you can look at a person's behaviour, you can hear their language, you can observe their actions. And you can think to yourself, well, all of that is driven by their model of the world, which may be very different to mine, and that's okay. Notice we say respect. It doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It's having that healthy respect. So rather than telling someone, no, you're wrong, that's not correct, we think about, okay, how are they creating that concept? How are they creating their thinking? And then we can think about how we can gracefully shift them to a different way of thinking. The meaning of the communication is the response you get. So this is an important part of NLP because we are all responsible for our own communication. We're all responsible for the language that we choose. And if somebody understands us incorrectly, if they mishear or misunderstand, that is our responsibility. So however somebody responds to you, that's what your communication meant to them. And so if they're giving you indication that your intention wasn't properly understood, then you need to be flexible in your approach. Being flexible in your approach means you can state things in different words, using different sentences so that they can better understand you. We always work on the concept that the mind and the body affect each other. We have a very robust system of neurological connections in our bodies as human beings. And our mind and our body work together. So if somebody is physically unhealthy, that's going to affect the health of their mind. And if their mental health isn't all it could be, that's going to affect their body. That's important to us as leaders and managers, because you will probably see physical symptomology of somebody not being at the top of their performance before you hear or see or feel the psychological effects. So one gives us an indicator of the other. The most important information that we have about anybody is their behaviour. So remember the model I showed you earlier? So someone's behaviour is generated directly from how they are representing the world in their psychology. So we can't look into people's minds and mind read them. Oh, that we could. All we can do is observe them, observe their physiology, observe their external behaviour. And by tracking that back into the model of thinking, we can start to work out how they're thinking. We also hold the assumption that somebody's present behaviour is the best choice available to them right now. So people don't do behaviours just because they want to. They're doing the behaviour for a reason. It's been generated by their internal representation, and it's the best choice that they have right in that moment. Because a person's behaviour isn't who they are. We can accept the person and look to change the behaviour. So in NLP, we have lots of different ways of encouraging somebody who wants to change their behaviour to change that behaviour. We work on the assumption that there are no unresourceful people, that everybody has all the resources they need inside of themselves to be highly successful. It's when people get into unresourceful states, so negative emotions like stress and nerves and anxiety and anger and fear. When people get into those unresourceful states, they lose connection with their capabilities. It's like when you get brain fog. When you're in an unresourceful state, because your mind and body are connected, your brain chemistry changes. And when your brain chemistry changes, it means that you can't think with clarity and flexibility to find solutions to problems. So mind and body are connected. When people get in an unresourceful state, they lose their performance capability. We also assume that the person with the most flexibility of behaviour will control the situation. So that means as project managers, if you install real flexibility in your behaviour, so you move out of rigid thought patterns, you move out of rigid and repetitive behavioural patterns and get really flexible, it means that you can have more control over the situation that you'll find yourself in. So the more flexibly we can think and behave, the more we'll be able to fit into every project environment, even the ones that don't feel comfortable, and generate really great results. We work on the basis that there's no failure. I'm just going to go past that one because I'm going to talk about it in more detail in just a moment. We work on the basis that there are no resistant team members, only inflexible communicators. People don't resist you, resist your ideas and resist change because they want to be difficult. They're doing it because their psychological processing is working in a certain way that is telling them, no, resist this. This isn't good. This doesn't feel comfortable. If we can communicate with those people in a way that bypasses that resistance, their blockages to change and their blockages to high performance, then we can easily remove that resistance. And finally, we always think about behaviour in terms of the context that it's in. Because, of course, environments change the way people respond to things. You might respond very differently in your project office than you would respond when you're in the office of the chief exec or the CEO, into which you're the organisation you're putting the project. And then again, you might respond totally differently when you're at home, relaxed. So we should always think of behaviour in terms of the context that we observe it in. Is it appropriate in this context? So if as a project manager, you can begin to embrace some of these concepts, you just start to look at your team members in a much more encompassing and flexible way. Actually looking at them as human beings who are fragile, because we are, and who have thought processes that change second by second, and who have emotions. Then we can start to really understand the people puzzle, and we can start to put all the pieces in place so that we can have a holistic view of our whole project team, member by member, and to be able to do that easily and quickly. So just stepping back for a moment into this concept of there's no failure, only feedback. This is a really convenient assumption to adopt. Think about it for a moment. If you knew you couldn't fail, would you do things differently? Would you do more than you're doing now? Would you attempt things that you haven't attempted so far? Because one of the key things that holds many executives back, many professionals, is the fear of failure. They say to me, I'm not doing that because I'm afraid that I'll fail at it. Now, if we took the word failure completely out of your vocabulary, like it didn't exist, then when things don't work out the way you hoped they would, we can treat that as a learning experience. It's feedback. So we can eliminate failure by learning something new every time we do something that doesn't quite work. So for an example, if you have a project implementation and when you measure it, it comes out as being failed for one reason or another. Maybe it didn't meet the budgetary constraints, maybe it didn't meet time constraints, or maybe it didn't meet satisfaction on delivery for the end user. Now, however a project failed, that's not really failure. Okay, it didn't work out how we'd hoped, let's learn from it. Now, that has to be real practical learning. I cast my mind back from when I was a project manager, and after every project, all the stakeholders got together and we produced a lessons learned document. And it usually looked like a spreadsheet, and it had lots of lines in it of all the things that hadn't gone to plan, everything that had gone wrong from a measurement point of view, and the lesson we'd learned from it. And you know what? Nobody ever did anything with them. So we had all these learnings, and we went on to make the same mistakes again next time. So when you think about things that you need to learn lessons from, the key here is to make sure that they become active and that those lessons become integrated into the next project and the next and the next and the next. So that the whole concept of failure, that doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter at all. Because when we fail, in inverted commas, it means that we've got a learning opportunity. Because if you think about it, the things that don't work well, the things that go wrong, are the things that help us develop and grow, both as individuals and as teams and as organisations. Because if nothing ever went against the way we wanted it to, then we'd never learn anything. We'd never grow, we'd never develop. So if we can change our thinking to accept when errors have happened and accept when things didn't work out, and then build them into our neurology, our thinking, our behaviours for next time, because that's personal growth, that's team growth. So things have to go wrong in order for us to learn and grow as people, as teams, as organisations. And if you can embrace that, we get into that mindset where we become way more flexible and we're willing to think way more out of the box. Because even if it doesn't work, we learn something, and we learn something that is really valuable. So I'm going to leave you with the thought of Thomas Edison. When he was creating the light bulb, everybody said to him, "How on earth have you kept going when you've tried 10,000 different ways to make a light bulb and you failed every single time? How on earth did you keep the motivation going to do that?" And he simply said, "I haven't failed once. I've just found 10,000 ways that it won't work." It's a learning process. So I've just taken you on a very rapid and brief journey of some of the insights that neuro-linguistic programming can offer you within your projects, within your project teams, within your organisations, and most importantly, for you as individuals. I'm happy, and I would be thrilled for any of you to get in touch. So I've placed my contact details there on the screen for you. So numbers and email address and the website. And of course, you can also find Quest for Success on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. So give us a follow. So now I believe that we have a chunk of time that we can take now for you to ask questions. So as Lukey said in the beginning there, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. So there's a couple there, just let me have a look.
Yeah. So guys, if you have any questions, just feel free to send the inquiry to the chat box, or you would like to speak to Christine, just let us know. And by the way, thank you very much, Christine. It is very insightful presentations. And if you don't mind, I have a questions for you. Maybe it is
Yeah,
little discussion, yeah. Yeah.
go ahead, Lucy.
Yeah. So Christine, as we aware that a project is not a vacuum environment, as you mentioned, sometimes we encounter with people that disagreeing with us. And where this happen, we are not always in our optimal conditions in terms of mentality, I mean. And it is not impossible. Our emotion is changing if this happen. So before even we take time to think to understand our opponent, we just react with our emotions. So my question is how we deal with these conditions to stay in control of our mind and emotions by leveraging NLP.
Great question, Lucy. And there are levels of answers I could give you to that because it's a big question. At its simplest, we have processes within NLP called anchoring. And anchoring is about being able to control your emotional condition. So how to call on really positive emotions whenever you need them. So if you're facing a lot of resistance, people are disagreeing with you, and you're starting to feel maybe anxious about that, or nervous about it, or under pressure from it, we have processes that will allow you to push those to one side and to immediately call up emotions which are resourceful for you. So maybe calm, or maybe feeling resilient, or maybe feeling capable, whatever the resourceful state is for you. So we have different techniques that allow self-control, so self-emotional control. And once you're in a resourceful emotion, then your language can be constructed in a way that can help somebody to move towards your point of view rather than resisting it. And then we move into a different part of NLP, which is about using your language in terms of being able to reframe. So having people view a concept from different perspectives. Instead of being stuck in their perspective, in their box of thinking, I'm in my box and I'm not coming out of it, we can use our language to help them to take different viewpoints, which opens up their choice. NLP is very much about increasing choice for people, rather than having them stuck in a box of thinking, to get rid of those barriers and to be able to open up different perspectives. And that's how we would deal with that resistance that projects can initiate, because it's change and people are sometimes uncomfortable with change.
Well, thank you. That's a lot of key that discussion. So I guess we have to be able in their perspective first, and then there is something that I would agree in your statement, that our emotions will construct our words, how we're gonna say to people, how we react to people. So it is very significant to control our emotions. And however, Christian, there is also questions in here from our participants. Thank you for
Okay.
Satria Hadi Surya. So the question is asking about how the fresh graduate, I think this is the fresh graduate that just jump into the first career, can influence other people or lead people with less experience. Okay.
Again, that's again a great question, isn't it? And the thing is, when you're a really great communicator and when you've got control of your emotional state, experience in the job doesn't matter. It's a similar concept to being a coach. If you're coaching somebody, you don't have to know everything about the business that they work in and be an expert in it. You're coaching their thinking, you're coaching their behavior. So you don't have to be an expert in, let's say, IT in order to coach somebody who works in IT. And this concept is the same here, in that you might be fresh into project management, you might just have done your PMP qualifications, and you might just have entered the world of work. It doesn't matter, the experience doesn't matter. It's how you use your language and how you control your state that will be influential. It's not the experience. People can respect you because you use influential language. Respect's not just about your experience and project successes that you can put in your portfolio. It's more than that. Yanda, I hope that answers your question. I've got a little thumbs up, so I think maybe it did.
Okay, so we next to another question. Thank you, Yanda. Hope that answered your questions. And there's also from Christians. Do we need to learn to analyze each team personality with project for use running project successfully?
Again, another great question. Now, I know with this little bit of information I've given you today, that might seem like a gargantuan task to be able to understand the personality of everybody within the project. With more learning and more technique, that can happen very quickly. And we can do it by using a 3-step process. Stop thinking in your own head, so get outside of yourself, look, observe people, and listen. Listen to the language that your team are using. And when you know how to listen to their language, you can work out a great deal about their preferences and the builders and building blocks of their personality very, very quickly. So I know it sounds like a big task. With more learning, it becomes really quick and easy.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Christian, I hope that answered your question.
All right, so there is also some, there's still questions in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah, the second questions. If we are angry with standing condition. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so he asking about whether our gestures is influence our emotional state and how to deal with that condition.
If we are angry with the condition, my prophet said you should sit down to decrease angry. And when we sit down, okay, that's really interesting that in your prophet's way of thinking, you know, changing that orientation of the body will change the state. And as I think through that, There is a lot of sense in that, because when you change how your body is oriented from standing to lying, your breathing changes. So the location of your breathing and how quickly or slowly you're breathing will alter with the orientation of your body. And if you're very angry, that is going to typically increase your breathing rate and make it much deeper and stronger. If you sit and then lie, you can't maintain that same breathing. Your physiology won't do it. So there is something in that. I can add to that from an NLP point of view. We have a process within NLP called timeline therapy. And what timeline therapy does, it allows us to remove negative emotion from the past. Because when we feel a negative emotion, we are generally relating the situation to something that's happened to us before, and that's what tells us to be angry. So if we can clean up the personal history and get rid of the angry from there, then it means that as you look towards the future, the amount of times you are required to be angry is much less. And so you don't get angry quite as often. So I hope that helps a little bit, Yanda.
Okay, Christine. So I guess your answer will satisfy Yanda Satria Hadisurya. And on, because we are just come to the end of this session, so maybe there is some question, maybe a little bit discussions again for the closing. So I aware that you mentioned there is no resistant members, just only inflexible communicators. So I was thinking that, is there any root cause of this resistant behavior that trigger the person? Do you have the opinion?
Yeah, again, a really big question. Your thoughts are really deep, Yuki. So, you know, when people resist you, your language has triggered in them a strategy in their thinking which leads to resistance. So something you said, or indeed the way you said it, or indeed what your physiology was doing as you said it, could trigger off somebody's resistance. So that might be a word that you've said. It might be how high or low pitched your voice was, or how loud or soft your voice was, or what your gestures were doing in your body at the time. So something in that will have triggered a response in the person. And they go through a system of thinking which ends up in resistance. So in order to get them out of that resistance, it means we have to be really flexible and change something. So either change the words, or change the way we've said something, or change our gestures. And in doing that, we can help them to move away from the negative trigger and to be encouraged to think differently. An interesting little stat is that whenever we communicate, only 7% of the meaning is carried in the words we use. 38% of the meaning is carried in the way we use our voice, so the pitch of our voice, the speed and the volume, and a whole huge 55% is carried unconsciously in how we move our body. So 93% of every communication you make is unconscious.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. So I'm 30% of communication is by gestures. Oh, so yeah, I'm agree with your statement that about that how we deliver a message can also influence our opponent, whether they want to accept the fact or they will be going to be a resistant. And yeah, maybe that's the key that we want to highlight. The first, how to maybe paraphrase the message, and then how your intonations can influence people also, and the gestures. Yeah, thank you, Christine. So thank you for everyone. So we just come to the end of the sessions, and in here we are very happy to have Christians from the United Kingdom and to be here with us. It is a pleasure, Christine. Thank you.
It was a pleasure for me too. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, for the attendees, so because we just have our session and please open your camera and David, please, can you take a picture of us?
Okay, sure. Let's give a couple of seconds to the participant to open their camera. Once again, thank you, Christine, for the session, interesting session, and I believe it inspired a lot of participants here. Okay, so I will start taking the picture. Okay, show your best pose. Okay, the first page. The second page. Okay, done.
Okay, thank you very much. So for the attendees, if you still want to connect with Christine, can attendees connect with you if they have something that want to discuss with you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you can connect with her LinkedIn, Christine Dawson. You can search it on LinkedIn with her name. So yeah, thank you everyone. We are very pleased to have you here and see you for the next chance. Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Mr.
Bye.
Iksan.
Bye. Thank you, Kristen.